You're tuning into Black and White Sports on YouTube. The no-holds-barred truth on sports. The main event starts.
All right, Black and White Sports supporters. Well, we're going to talk about Shedeur Sanders, Dillon Gabriel, the Browns quarterback situation, and the Browns stadium situation. This is something I've made a video or two about over on Black and White Sports 2 when we were still doing actual football over there. I get fascinated by these stadium situations because it can mean some kind of a significant move within the area. Okay, right now, Kansas City Chiefs have a very interesting situation going on where there's a faction of a group that's trying to get them moved out of Missouri over into Kansas, to the Kansas side of Kansas City. And now, while the Browns aren't going to be doing something like that, you know, the ghost of Art Modell still looms, right? So let's do Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders because this does not sound like good news for Shedeur Sanders. But it's something that if you pay attention to the NFL, it's something you already know. All right? The higher you're picked in the draft does carry weight when there's the evaluation process is going on. Why? Because every draft pick is considered an investment. And Dillon Gabriel was a higher investment in the third round than Shedeur is in the fifth. Now, it would be the most Browns thing ever if Dillon Gabriel actually did not perform as well and they still gave him the job over Sanders due to draft position. I think this carries a caveat. And it's because, and we've talked about this before, this is an investment, all right, by Jimmy Haslam. And I'm talking about Sanders. All right? Look, Jimmy Haslam is a clown. He's one of these owners. David Tepper, Woody Johnson, Jimmy Haslam, Bidwell in Arizona. One of these clown show owners that can't get their organizations run in the right direction, right? Jed York was there for years with the Niners until he finally said, F it, I got to have the hotshot coach and the GM at the same time in lockstep. Let's take a look at this. I think if it came down to the two, I think Jimmy Haslam would still make them pick Sanders. I do, if you're looking at a literal cut situation. But Dillon Gabriel, he looks pretty good in camp too. So, the most polarizing prospect in the 2025 NFL Draft was former Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, mocked by some to be a top 5 pick. Sanders, not if you were paying attention. He was falling off 3 months before the draft. After the combine and him not throwing there, he plummeted. Sanders fell all the way to the 5th round, eventually being scooped up by the Browns, who had already taken Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round. Man, I got to tell you, if that kid was 6'3", holy shit. The problem is his size. It's still a big question mark who starts between the two rookies, Sanders and Gabriel, or the two veterans, Flacco and Pickett. I still think Pickett gets traded or released. On Wednesday, a report from ESPN's Kimberly A. Martin suggested Sanders could be the Week 1 starting quarterback. You got to be careful. ESPN is a lot like the way they do certain other stars like LeBron and Angel Reese. They're trying to prop up Shedeur Sanders for ulterior motives. So you got to be careful, right? Listen, in that building, there are people who believe that Shedeur 100% can be the starter of this football team, Martin said about the Browns during a Wednesday appearance on ESPN's Get Up. You said it's incumbent upon the Browns to put him in this situation. It's also incumbent upon Shedeur to do the work, which, talking to people in that building, they've said he is soaking up everything like a sponge. According to a graphic posted by ESPN Cleveland, on day 2 of the open Browns OTAs, Gabriel led the potential starting quarterbacks in passing attempts. Gabriel completed 11 of 20 passes. That's not good. Throwing 3 touchdowns. That is good. And 0 interceptions. That is good. Pickett had the second most throws, going 9 of 15 with 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Sanders wasn't far behind, 9 of 14, finding the end zone thrice, but throwing an interception. He had 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. These stats could be meaningless, and Cleveland is obviously testing out all 4 quarterbacks to determine who deserves the job. You notice Flacco wasn't in there. It's because he doesn't need the reps. He knows his offense. During the latest edition of the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, Browns reporter Dan Labb and Ashley Babstock noted that Gabriel likely remains ahead of Sanders in the depth chart due to draft position. Quote, where they draft these guys matters. It does. And there's a reason they drafted them, and they do care about that to an extent, Labb explains. Dillon Gabriel was a third-round pick. And so while we're sitting here saying he hasn't looked the best of the 2 quarterbacks, especially Wednesday, he also just got a longer leash, and he's got more room to maybe not be the guy they've envisioned yet, because he's a third-round pick, and that matters. So that's telling you right there, they're putting real stock in where they were drafted. That's a thing, and it is a thing. But I think Jimmy Haslam's in the background on this, and I think that changes the dynamics. All right, we saw what he did to get Deshaun Watson on the team. We also saw how that worked out. Not well. So here we go. Florio's probably watching. Yep, Florio's watching this. On Wednesday, the team Haslam Sports Group executive VP and COO David Jenkins was available to reporters to discuss recent developments. Let's see. They're trying to get a new stadium. Mechanism isn't clear. The Browns are hoping to get $600 million in state funding for a $2.4 billion venue built in Brook Park, assuming the Art Modell law doesn't get in the way. Quote, we're very excited that the Senate chose to include $600 million in their version of the budget, but not nearly to the finish line yet, Jenkins said. So there's been 3 versions of $600 million, starting with the governor. Him putting it in first obviously signaled a desire at a state level to enable this project. Seconded by the House, their version, and again, 3 different constructs. The state has until June 30th to finalize a budget that will raise the money by increasing taxes on gambling, issuing state bonds, or taking money from unclaimed property fund. Jenkins also was asked about criticism arising from reluctance of ownership to privately fund the stadium. Quote, I think we've been pretty clear from the outset that it takes a public-private partnership to enable this project, Jenkins said. And I think there's a bit of conflating of issues here. So to say that the $600 million going to us is created by pulling from other sources is, I think, pretty unfair and inaccurate way of presenting it. So we defer to state leadership. Again, all 3 branches of government have signaled a willingness to desire to enable this project, and we'll see what happens on June 30th. Somebody is getting their wheels greased somewhere, their gears greased in all this. Somebody stands to make some money, and I'm talking about politicians. But the $600 million that goes to the Browns necessarily could have gone elsewhere. Balancing a public budget is a zero-sum game. Less that goes to one column is more that could go in the other column. The Browns still need $600 million in local funding to make it a true 50-50 public-private partnership. The county is out if the Browns insist on going to Brook Park, so they'll need to find $600 million elsewhere. Regardless, the Browns are optimistic that $600 million from the state will happen. Quote, there's 3 different ideas on the table now, so what happens behind closed doors, I think those 3 branches of government will work hard. They've all said $600 million is okay for the project. They want to do it, and they want to enable the project. So I think they'll work collaboratively to find a final solution. There's still a lot more that needs to happen before a stadium can be built. Coming up with $1.2 billion in public funding is half the financing battle. The Browns could be closing in on getting half of that. So even if they get the $600 million, they need another $600 million on top of it. So at the state level, they're wanting to find the $600 million. But then they probably got to find $600 million at a local level. That becomes a little hairier, especially if they go to Brook Park. It's going to be interesting to see how this works. I don't know. I know there's been talk that it's going to be a dome stadium, and maybe some Cleveland fans want to see that. I mean, I'm not in Cleveland. I just know how Cleveland Browns football looks on TV when it's gray and it's cold, and it's one of those places that on TV the atmosphere becomes very much part of the game. And if you go into a dome stadium, you may very well lose that. But I think that's where most of these stadiums are going to be dome stadiums, or at least retractable, because they want to be able to host other events year-round to help pay for the cost of the stadium. In other words, look, WrestleMania was what? In Cleveland, not this year, but last year or the year before. I can't remember for sure. But you understand what I'm talking about with that. During the winter, they can't have WrestleMania there. But in theory, they could have Survivor Series or the Royal Rumble. I mean, and I'm just using wrestling as an example, but that is, for example, one of the kind of events we're talking about here, right? So, or maybe even, for example, SummerSlam. Oh, well, hell, that's way too hot. No, not if it's in a dome. It's not. It's regulated. You think that's not a big deal? WrestleMania is going back to Las Vegas 2 years in a row because of that Raiders Dome Stadium. Throw in monster trucks, concerts, the whole nine. So you get the point. This could work out. There's a world where Jimmy Haslam can get very fat here. If somehow, some way, Shedeur Sanders actually does work out, become a good starting quarterback, if he is even a top 15 quarterback, he's going to be a star because the media is going to pump him up massively. He's already got his own built-in fan base from Colorado that came in. I said it. I'll say it. I said it before. I'll say it again. Came in the same way that all those Iowa fans followed Caitlin Clark into the WNBA. Same thing with Shedeur. Merch, all of it. So, in theory, in the perfect world, Haslam is getting a brand new stadium and a brand new quarterback all at the same time, or within a year or two or three. That's a big deal. That is a big deal, no doubt about it. Tell me what you think. Peace. I'm out. Till next time.
Thanks for watching the show. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Be sure to tune in next time on Black and White Sports.